In December of 1914, World War I had already become something far darker than people expected. Just a few months earlier, many across Europe believed the war would be over by Christmas. Instead, hundreds of thousands were already dead. The first big campaigns had shattered that illusion. The German advance had been stopped. The race to the sea had ended in stalemate. And now a brutal line of trenches stretched across the Western Front. By Christmas, soldiers on both sides were cold, exhausted, filthy, and surrounded by mud. Many of them were living only a few dozen yards away from the men they were supposed to hate. And then, in one of the strangest moments in military history, something unbelievable happened. For a brief moment, in parts of the Western Front, the guns went quiet. British and German soldiers stopped shooting, and on Christmas Eve, enemies began speaking to each other across the darkness. The Christmas Truce was real, but it's important to understand what it actually was. It was not one giant organized peace agreement across the entire front. It was not officially approved by commanders, and it did not happen everywhere. In some sectors, the fighting continued, and men still died on Christmas Day. But in other areas, especially along parts of the line held by the British Expeditionary Force, soldiers on both sides began taking part in small, unofficial ceasefires. It started in different ways depending on the location. In some places, German troops placed lights or small Christmas trees near their trenches. In others, men shouted holiday greetings across no man's land. Then came the singing. British troops heard German soldiers singing carols, including Stille Nacht, Silent Night. The British answered with songs of their own, and little by little, the fear began to crack. Then came the moment that would make the truce legendary. Men began climbing out of their trenches, not in an attack, not with bayonets fixed, but slowly, cautiously, stepping into no man's land. The same ground that had been a killing field only days before suddenly became a place of human contact. British and German soldiers met face to face. They shook hands, they laughed, they talked. Many could not fully understand each other's language, but they understood enough. They exchanged cigarettes, tobacco, food, drink, buttons, badges, and small souvenirs. Some posed for photographs together. For a few hours, or in some places a little longer, the war seemed to pause. Not because politicians ordered it, not because generals planned it, but because ordinary soldiers, for one brief moment, remembered that the men across from them were human too. The truce was not only emotional, it was practical too. Both sides used the pause to do something they had often been unable to do safely: recover and bury their dead. Bodies had been lying between the trenches, sometimes for days. During the Christmas truce, soldiers gathered those remains and gave them proper burials. In a war already becoming known for industrial-scale slaughter, that mattered. It gave men a chance to show dignity to their fallen comrades. It also revealed something disturbing. The misery of trench life was shared by both sides. The cold, the mud, the fear, the smell of death, the endless waiting. For a short time, soldiers could see that the enemy was suffering through the same nightmare they were. And yes, the football story is part of the legend, but this is where people often exaggerate what happened. Reliable historical sources do support that, in some places, soldiers played informal games of football during the truce. There are letters and later accounts that mention it. One source even repeats a reported score of 3-2 in favor of the Germans. But this was not one official match across the whole front. It was not a carefully organized tournament. The safest way to say it is this. On some parts of the line, soldiers who had been trying to kill each other only hours before took part in impromptu games of football. And honestly, that may be even more powerful than the myth, because it means the moment was spontaneous, human, unplanned, real. But the truce did not last. After Christmas Day, and in many places after Boxing Day, the meetings began to fade. Commanders on both sides were deeply uncomfortable with what had happened. From their point of view, fraternizing with the enemy was dangerous. It weakened discipline. It threatened the idea that the men across the line were monsters instead of fellow soldiers. High Command moved to prevent anything on that scale from happening again. And as the war went on, conditions changed. The fighting became even more mechanized, more bitter, and more deadly. Poison gas, mass artillery barrages, huge offensives, mountains of casualties. The deeper the war sank into brutality, the less possible a moment like Christmas 1914 became. That is one reason the Christmas Truce is still remembered more than a century later. Not because it ended the war, it didn't. Not because it changed military strategy, it didn't. And not because it happened everywhere, it absolutely did not. It is remembered because it exposed a truth that war always tries to bury. That even in the middle of hatred, propaganda, and mass violence, human beings can still recognize each other. For one cold Christmas in 1914, in scattered places along the Western Front, soldiers stepped out of the roles history had forced onto them. They stopped being targets, stopped being uniforms, stopped being the enemy, and became men. Men who sang, men who buried the dead, men who traded cigarettes, men who shook hands in the mud. And then, when the moment was over, they went back to war. But it left behind something rare. Proof that even in one of history's most violent conflicts, there was still a moment, however brief, when humanity broke through. And maybe that's why people still talk about it today. Because in a war built on orders, fear, and death, peace appeared for a single Christmas night. Not from the top, but from the trenches,